All this talk of getting old is getting me down, my love. Now the drugs don't work, they just make you worse.
There is an overwhelming abundance of evidence in terms of documentation showing that there has been an unexplained phenomenon interacting with the militaries of this world for a very long time, that this phenomenon has been taken seriously, and that they've enveloped the topic in secrecy. They've misrepresented it to the public time and again. It's obvious that there's something important happening here with technology that, frankly, is not supposed to exist.
Well, okay, people, welcome back to the channel, or if you're first time here, welcome. We're going to go with the second installment of Operation Antiquity. We left off in video 1 with the Aurora, Texas incident. That's what we're going to pick up in 2. And then after this incident, we're going to move into the 19th century. Well, okay, let's not waste any time. Let's get into it.
Aurora, Texas, 1897. 50 years before Roswell. Newspapers reported a major crash and a dead spaceman buried in the Aurora Cemetery. A mysterious airship was seen in the skies over the small Fort Worth suburb of Aurora, Texas, on a collision course with the home of a local judge.
The story of the Aurora crash is fairly simple and straightforward. According to the newspaper accounts at the time, early in the morning of April 17th, 1897, a large silver cigar-shaped object came fluttering closer and closer to the earth, struck a tower at Judge Proctor's house, scattering debris all over the place.
According to the local legend, many of Aurora's residents raced to Judge J.S. Proctor's farm to help in any way they could. What they found was beyond comprehension. The Dallas Morning News reported that someone or something was in the craft.
Pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains were badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that he was not an inhabitant of this world.
Of course, I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure who piloted the craft. All I can go is by the newspaper accounts, and they made it quite clear that the remains clearly indicated he was not an inhabitant of this world.
My initial reaction to the Aurora story, I have to admit, was a little bit of one of skepticism. But if you're going to be a history writer, you need to at least make a stab at trying to find out the truth. And that's what launched my investigation. When I began to research it, however, I found that there was more to the story than just the Aurora incident. I went to the Dallas Morning News, assuming that the Aurora story would be a headline on page 1. Well, it wasn't. It was buried in the middle of page 5. And what intrigued me was it wasn't even the first airship story on that page.
In fact, there were over a dozen different articles about the mysterious airships listed in the April 19th edition of the paper.
There were at least 16 in that same area the 2 days before this incident. 16 reported cases by reputable people is significant.
For those 2 months in 1897, literally hundreds of Texans saw something in the night air over Texas. They described it as cigar-shaped. Some people said it had lights, some people said it didn't. Some said it could go 200, 150, 300 miles an hour. It could do things that airships today can barely do.
Top speed at that time was about 35 to 40 miles an hour by train. And for reputable people to say something flew over their head going more than 100 miles an hour would be the same as us saying something went over our head going thousands of miles an hour.
Texas historian Wallace Cheriton focused his research on the incident on the so-called witnesses listed in the newspaper articles.
What I was trying to do was prove, were these real people? I was very pleased to find, yes, they were. They were, in fact, real people. I'm not sure that we'll ever know what they were seeing. What I am sure is they saw something. Could it have been a balloon? Perhaps. Probably not an airplane, since those didn't exist.
The first recorded man-made heavier-than-air flight was made, of course, by the Wright brothers in December of 1903 at Kitty Hawk. So whatever was flying over Texas in 1897 was not man-made.
Ufologist Jim Mars was among the first to interview the residents.
In 1973, I interviewed 3 people who were alive at the time. One, Robbie Hansen, said it was a hoax, but then by her own story, she was not a direct witness, had no direct knowledge of it. Her father was told about it, he laughed, thought it was a hoax, and that stuck in her mind.
But then, Mars discovered 2 witnesses who contradicted Hansen and offered first-hand accounts of the actual crash.
There's Mary Evans, who did recall that something crashed. Her parents went to look at the wreckage but would not let her go. So we have kind of an indirect witness there who says it did happen. And then we've got Charlie Stevens, who is a 10-year-old boy, was out doing the chores and actually told me he saw the thing go over and said it was trailing smoke and it seemed to be in trouble. He saw it disappear towards Aurora, heard the explosion, saw smoke going up. He wanted to go up and see what had happened, but his father, this old farmer in 1897, said, "No, son, we have to finish the chores." And he said his father went up into town the next day and came back and told him about all the wreckage that was lying around. So the preponderance of the eyewitness testimony leans towards something happened.
In addition to eyewitness accounts, researchers located one man who added a new twist to the investigation. Aurora resident Brawley Oates, who suffered from an extreme case of rheumatoid arthritis, believed his debilitating health condition was somehow connected to the Aurora legend.
Brawley Oates lived at the site of the crash. I believe he moved there in 1945. And when he moved there, he had the well cleaned out because it had all this metal stuff and debris down in it. And he needed to use it for water. Oates believes that the water in that well that he and his family drank for about 12 years affected their health drastically. In fact, he developed some of the worst arthritis conditions in his hands and other things that anybody has seen. The stories were that this thing exploded. It blew molten material out of this vast explosion mess, and that material hit things and dried and cooled. Well, the structural analysis of the material showed that it was air-cooled on the ground after it had been molten in the air. So the structure was perfect to fit the story.
So anyway, again, people, I'm just putting information out there. You can choose to believe it or not believe it. But that is all I've got on the Aurora, Texas incident. Moving on to military operation. First operation is Air Force operation, right? And that was going to be Project Sign. Their conclusion was that it was just a lot of misidentifications and weather phenomenon. Okay, well, close the book on Project Sign. They launch Project Grudge. Different purpose though. The purpose of Grudge was very simple. It was to actually explain away all the phenomenons that people were calling and reporting. So that would decrease the public anxiety of the times. Project Grudge concludes that what they'd been studying in the last 4 years are simply misinterpretations, again, of weather phenomenon. And there were hoaxes, just plain flat out hoaxes. Nothing to it. There's nothing to any of that. Okay, so now we have Project Sign, then we had Project Grudge that followed Sign, all of that leading up to Project Blue Book. However, we're not jumping into Blue Book yet because something happens between Grudge and Blue Book that takes the nation by storm. Though to be fair, it doesn't take the nation by storm in 1947. No, it takes the nation by storm in the year 1978, the year of my birth. In 1978 is when Stanton Friedman goes to Roswell, sits down and interviews one Jesse Marcel. You've all heard of deathbed confessions. Let me just get this out of the way. This ain't that. Mr. Jesse Marcel didn't pass away until 1986. This interview was done in 78. 1978 is actually when the craze of Roswell really goes public and becomes known as the UFO cover-up. It's before 1969, the year that Project Blue Book ends. That's why I got it put where I have it put.
It began in Roswell, New Mexico. Near White Sands and Alamogordo, Roswell was home base for many early tests of atom bombs and guided missiles. Reporters heard that the Air Force had found fragments of the mystery object crashed on a remote ranch northwest of Roswell. Excitement ran high until officials announced it was only a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel, in charge of the operation, now tells a far different story.
They took pictures, of course. They had a whole flock of microphones there. They wanted me they wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who discussed what it was and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon, of course, which we both knew differently.
Major Marcel had to keep silent because of his strategic position at that time. He was in charge of all security and intelligence on atomic tests in the United States and the Pacific.
The following morning, we went out to the site where the crash was. And what I saw, I couldn't believe there was so much of it. It was scattered over such a vast area. So we proceeded to pick up as much of the debris as we could, loaded in a wagon. We filled that up. It took us a good part of the day to do that, because it was such small fragments that we had to do a lot of picking. We found a piece of metal about a 1.5 to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. Felt like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it. You couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off of it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was. It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of. Because being an intelligence officer, I was familiar with just about all materials used in aircraft and our air travel. This is nothing like that. It could not have been.
Third project. This is going to be different from the first two projects. You ask me why, I'll tell you why. I really don't know why it would be different. I have no fucking clue, but we're going to tell you anyway. Project Blue Book. It goes into effect 1947 to 1969. 22 years. Now, why is this different from Project Grudge and Project Sign? Because they classified this is not a military operation. No. This lasted 22 years, but it wasn't a military operation. Nope. Instead of a military operation, it was simply a project of the United States Air Force. What's the difference? I don't have a fucking clue. Your guess is as good as mine. But I do know that it's significantly different for that reason. I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a very smart man, but when something's worded different, there's a reason for it. I just hadn't come to the conclusion of the reason why they would word it that way yet. I'm sure if I do, that'll be another one of my videos on conspiracy theories. Over 1,200 cases were studied in that 22-year period. Every one of them had a conclusion, with the exception, I think, of 1,200 cases, been around 7%, maybe 5 to 7%. They could not identify or come up with an answer for. So it happens that those 1,200 cases are the ones that a majority of people are interested in. We don't give a shit about Uncle Billy out on the back porch shooting squirrels saying they're green lizard people. We don't care about that. We're interested in the other 1,200. We're going to stop the video right there. I appreciate all of you coming and hanging out. I know there's other places you can be, watching other people do other things, but you're here with me on this video, and I thank you for that. Guys, I will see you next time.
You stopped off for ice cream. When the fuck did we get ice cream?
Wait, what's this?
Are you okay? Dude, you know that feeling when you take a huge dump? Awesome.
Perhaps he just needs some hemorrhoid cream.
You alright? You know that feeling when the huge dump you just took shoots back up inside your ass? No, I'm not alright!
Hell to the no, to the no, no, no. Hell no, to the no.
Speak of the devil, and it shall appear.